And welcome back to Coast to Coast. Linda Moulton Howe back with us.
It's great to be back, and I'm going to start with the announcement of what I think is going to end up being the 9th planet of our solar system. And it actually goes back to a report that I did in 2003 on Coast and for Earth Files about a mysterious red-colored object that was discovered moving slowly like a planet at the very outer edges of our solar system.
That was a great story.
Yeah, and the scientists who first reported that mystery were astronomers Michael Brown at the California Institute of Technology and his colleagues Chad Trujillo of the Gemini Observatory in Hawaii and David Rabinowitz at Yale University. They had been working together on a NASA-sponsored project called Near-Earth Asteroid Tracking. Well, that team contacted other astronomers who began to look for this object. It was red, and they labeled it just simply 2003 VB12. But after it was photographed by the Palomar Observatory, more study indicated that it was all ice. That was probably what was reflecting the red color, and it is one of the coldest objects in our solar system with temperatures never rising above minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's why the astronomers decided to call the mystery object, now known to be an icy body, Sedna, and that was after an Arctic myth about a native woman who had been thrown into frigid, icy waters. Well, over the last 13 years, Sedna is one of 13 bodies that he has now found to have very odd, elongated, elliptical orbits. Sedna is probably one of the biggest, most strange. And these orbiting bodies are all clustered in the same section at the far reaches of our solar system, as if that something gravitationally is attracting them, holding them like a bunch of ducks that are following something very large but is invisible. And now Professor Brown at Caltech has discovered a much bigger object far beyond Sedna. In fact, he thinks he has discovered what might be a gaseous planet similar to Neptune, and that it is 10 times the mass of Earth and 7 times the distance from Earth to Neptune. And that distance is 19,565,000,000 miles from our sun. And Professor Brown just calls it Planet 9. He is the one responsible for having Pluto reduced down to an icy dwarf planet, and this one may replace that 9th position. Here now from Caltech in Pasadena, California, to talk about new Planet 9 is Professor and planetary astronomer Mike Brown.
13 years ago, the discovery of Sedna was the first hint that there was something funny going on in the outer solar system. The peculiar thing about Sedna is it has a very elongated orbit, something like 12,000 years to go around the sun. And in addition, when it does go around the sun and it comes back close to the sun, it never gets very close to the sun. In fact, it's almost twice the distance of Neptune is the closest that it ever gets. It's very difficult to explain how an orbit like that got there. So when Sedna was discovered, we knew it was strange. We knew that we didn't have enough information to figure out what was going on with it. And we've actually been trying for the last 13 years to answer that question.
When I look at the graphic that came out with your January 20th, 2016 Astronomical Journal report about the gravitational evidence of a 9th planet in our solar system, there are 13 orbits all going to the left. The orbit to the right, labeled Planet 9, looks like is repulsing the other 13.
It's very strange, isn't it? This is something that we were also confused about when we first came up with evidence that that was the way that the orbits looked. We now finally understand they're in this gravitational interaction that forces them into this anti-line state. It's a little bit like Pluto and Neptune, which Pluto crosses Neptune's orbit. Neptune always pushes Pluto and keeps it in its place. They never actually come very close to Planet 9, and they're forced to stay in that position. there were actual objects who were physically aligned in space, all going off in one particular direction. Once you realize that, you start to immediately think that there must be something else going on out there.
Can you explain how you interpret this to hypothesize that there must be a ninth planet in the Kuiper Belt that's 10 times the mass of the Earth?
Yeah, and I would say it's not in the Kuiper Belt, it's well beyond the Kuiper Belt. The basic idea was noticing that there was this pattern out there, but it's not a simple process. You don't just look at that pattern and say, oh, yeah, it must be a planet. It really did involve this detailed back and forth between computers and calculations and observations and just a lot of head-scratching, too.
And where exactly is it?
If we knew exactly where it was, we wouldn't have to be inferring that it's there. We would just go look at it and say, look, there it is. So we don't know exactly where it is because all we know is its long-term gravitational effect on these other bodies. We don't know where within its orbit it is. But we know its orbit pretty well, and we know the orbit pretty well because of all of these computer simulations which show if it's not massive enough, it doesn't affect the outer solar system. If it's too massive, it destroys the outer solar system. If it's not tilted the way we think it's tilted, it doesn't tilt the objects the way they're tilted. So all these details we can infer from these detailed computer simulations that we've been doing.
If something 10 times the size of the Earth is on that orbit, and it does come looping around the solar system at its closest approach, what would it do to the planets Earth and our neighbors?
The easy answer to that is absolutely nothing. The closest it ever comes to the sun is about 7 times the distance of Neptune. And it is a little bit less massive than Neptune. So having something less massive than Neptune 7 times further away means that it's something like 1% of the effect of Neptune. As it is, Neptune hardly affects the Earth. So there is nearly no effect at all. And if there were an effect on the Earth or on the Earth's orbit, it would be a lot easier to find because we have measurements of that really precisely. But I don't think we're going to find it due to its effect on the Earth.
Is it at the boundary between the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud?
No, there's a gap between the Kuiper Belt and the Oort clouds. The Kuiper Belt, I'll tell you everything in the units that we actually use, which is AU, astronomical units. 1 AU is the distance from the Earth to the Sun. And in those units, Neptune is 30 times the distance to the Earth to the Sun, 30 AU. The Kuiper Belt is between about 40 and 50 AU. Pluto, for example, is right at 40 AU. Planet 9 is on a very elliptical orbit. The closest that it comes is about 200 AU, so it's well beyond the outskirts of the Kuiper Belt. And the furthest distance it is probably something like 1,000 AU.
So a swing between 200 and 1,000 astronomical units.
Right.
And that's that big oval on this graphic.
Exactly. The Oort cloud is probably like 20,000 AU out to 100,000 AU.
Okay. So for people who have emailed me and said, could this be the planet Nibiru? There were several books by an author named Zecharia Sitchin who talked about a Sumerian, Mesopotamian carved cuneiform in which a planet that would move, I believe it was every 3,600 years in orbit. Would you explain if this discovery of Planet 9 could in any way be what the cuneiform that Zecharia Sitchin analyzed said was a moving planet that orbited in a large elliptical pattern?
No, it's funny. Every time I discover something new in the outer solar system, that's always the big question. Oh, it must be this Nibiru thing that was predicted.
I think it is because it is cuneiform, and you can see it in the British Museum and others where the Mesopotamian had carved in stone different planets, and because there were more planets than we had originally counted with Pluto, that's why everybody thinks, is there a planet out there that is orbiting our solar system?
Yeah. Unless they somehow had invented telescopes as big as the telescopes we have on the top of Mauna Kea today, then it seems really unlikely that they knew about this unless some conspiratorial aliens had come down and told them about that. That seems pretty unlikely to me.
Can you now describe this in terms of what you think is out there?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we know, of course, is that we know that it has to be something like 10 Earth masses to be able to have the effect that it does. And that makes it just a little bit less massive than Neptune. So our hypothesis is that it is a version of Neptune. And in fact, we even think we know where and how it formed. We think it probably formed at the same time alongside Uranus and Neptune, but then got a little bit too close to Saturn or a little bit too close to Jupiter and got ejected out to the outskirts of the solar system. We think it formed there, and we think it's like Neptune.
What about the orbital range that I have seen given as 10,000 to 20,000 years? Why is there that big, broad range?
The thing that we know best is how close it gets, because that's when it does most of its interaction with the outer solar system. It's harder to pin down how far it goes. So I keep on saying between 200 and 1,000 AU, but it might be more like 200 to 800 or even 200 to 1,200. And that range of distances will give you a variation between 10,000 and 20,000 years to go around the sun.
Which do you think is most likely?
I really don't know. The simulations, all the computer work that we've done so far, cannot answer that question.
What does the computer need to make the calculation?
There are two things that we need to do. One is it would be really helpful if we could find more objects in this cluster of objects like this. They will help give us more information about it. And the second thing we need to do is spend more time doing detailed computer simulations. Right now, this was about 6 months of supercomputer simulations to find the information we had. But now that we've zeroed in on what we think the interesting parameters are, we can look at more details now. And so we're just starting that process.
Does that now mean that our solar system is going to officially be back to 9 planets?
I don't think it's official yet. I think that we need to see it. But as soon as we see it, then absolutely yes.
Why is it that something so large would still be invisible to us?
It's really, really far away. So it's not particularly bright, but it's bright enough that we should be able to go find it.
What instruments can look and actually be able to see it?
The big telescopes of the world are the ones that we're going to be using to do it. And our favorite telescope for this task is the Subaru telescope on top of Mauna Kea on the big island of Hawaii. It's the biggest telescope in the world that has a really wide field of view camera, and that's the way to do it. You go get to look at a lot of sky at once, and we're heading out there in about 6 weeks to resume our search.
You will be there?
I will be there.
What would you estimate might be the time that it would take to discover with that Subaru telescope?
I think it will be found within 5 years, either by me looking or now some of the other people who are clued in that there's something out there to be found.
What will you be looking at in terms of infrared or?
Nope, just regular visible sunlight. It's sunlight that reflects off of Planet 9 all the way out there really far away and comes all the way back to us.
What will you be looking for?
Looking for a thing that moves just a little bit. We'll take a picture one night, come back, take a picture the next night, and look for the things that move.
So in 6 weeks, which would put you about the end of February, starting in March of 2016, you will be in Hawaii at the Subaru telescope?
Yes.
For how long?
It's just a preliminary look at a certain patch of the sky, and that's only going to take, we're only going to be there for one night. And we're going to come back, take a look at what we see, and rethink exactly the right places and ways to look at stuff. The motion that we're looking for in March will actually be motion from last year to this year, and then we'll be going back there again in the fall to start to look in more details at certain spots. So it's a long process. It doesn't happen quickly, but we're on the task.
But why does it take 5 years?
We could do it in 1 year if we had the telescope dedicated to us, but mostly it's because it's a big sky that we have to cover.
And George, there is a lot of competition in astronomy for telescope time.
Yeah.
You get it scheduled, you go to the telescope, you do what you need to do, but then it goes the next night to somebody else, and the Subaru telescope is going to be used for many other astronomical projects. So he explained that he expects that they will have one night of photographs, and then they're going to compare the March photographs of this particular wide-angle frame from the Subaru with plates that they know were taken over the last year or so. And what they're going to try to see is if they can see any movement between, let's say, a year ago or 2 years ago and this frame that they're going to take in March. But it could take 5 years because they can only get telescope time so often, and if they don't see that motion, they have to keep going back periodically to get new frames and do new comparisons. And throughout all of this, as competitive as it is to get telescope time, there's a new telescope that's being planned for construction on Mauna Kea, and they already have several there right now. I think it's a total of 13 telescopes. And a year ago, in April of 2015, the native Hawaiians protested the proliferation of observatories on what they consider to be their sacred mountain, Mauna Kea. And the protests actually stopped approval of this new, very much needed 30-meter telescope that would be up in kind of a little off, but where the cluster of the telescopes are. And things were stopped until a deal was worked out with the Hawaiian governor. And now what's going to happen is they're going to take down 25% of the 13 telescopes that are already there while they get ready to build this big new 30-meter that should come online in the mid-2020s. And by then, I would say that Professor Brown is going to know what is out there, this big mass, 10 times the mass of the Earth is what is needed to explain that strange clustering of Sedna and those 12 other objects. And it's amazing that something could be that big and still be invisible, and that it's not warm enough to see an infrared, and he expects to be able to see sun. But get this, it's mostly hydrogen and helium. And hydrogen does have a freeze point. It's very low, down, near 400 degrees Fahrenheit minus.
Right.
But you can't get helium out of a liquid state into ice.
So do you think old Zecharia Sitchin, the late Sitchin, was right about Anunnaki and Nibiru and all that?
But where is the object that travels around 3,600 years?
Yeah,
But he may have misunderstood a number, and something like this hiding out in the Kuiper Oort cloud, when I say hiding, meaning we can't see it, might be there, but it's not on a 3,600-year cycle.
I talked with Seth Shostak from SETI, Linda, many years ago, and we both agree that the primordial soup in the universe that is in our solar system is the same everywhere. The complexity is the same. So if you can get an Earth-like object close to its star, its sun, you might get life.
Well, I think this is going to be a big gaseous planet like Neptune. But even Neptune is much more complex than we ever thought as we've gotten better photos. So we are at the beginning of moving to Mars, moving out into our solar system, and finding that what we thought were dead bodies are not.
There's lots going on in the field of ufology these days, of course. You might remember the counselor to President Barack Obama, John Podesta, as he was leaving the White House, simply saying one of his biggest regrets, not really completing his work on UFOs, trying to get to the bottom of that. Hillary Clinton, asked a question by a reporter, talked about that too. Let's go back to Linda Moulton Howe with an incredible update. Go ahead, Linda.
That's right, George. John Podesta was born January 8th, 1949, is married, has 3 children, served as chief of staff in the second Bill Clinton administration, was White House counselor to President Barack Obama, overseeing climate change and energy policy. He was in the White House from December 2013 until he resigned in February 2015. to become the chairman of Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. During Bill Clinton's administration, John Podesta helped the president write Executive Order 12958 that led to the declassification of 800 million pages of American diplomatic and national security historic documents, but nothing very good about UFO documents, even though the executive order introduction includes these words, quote, "Our democratic principles require that the American people be informed of the activities of their government," close quote. John Podesta has also been known as a big fan of the TV series X-Files, that first broadcast on September 10, 1993, and it was centered around investigations of UFOs and an alien presence on Earth. And then recently, on Sunday, January 24, 2016, a new X-Files miniseries debuted to more than 25 million viewers, and the theme was E.T. and human hybrids manipulated by an alien presence on Earth. Hillary decided to run for president, and Podesta began to tweet about UFOs and aliens and Hillary. By December 30th, 2015, during campaigning in Conway, New Hampshire, Hillary was talking with reporter Damon Steer at the Conway Daily Sun. He had asked Hillary about UFOs in her 2007 first presidential campaign, and now asked her again in his December 2015 interview. He reported Hillary said with enthusiasm, quote, "Yes, I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I think we may have been visited already. We don't know for sure," close quote. Then she added that her 2016 campaign manager, John Podesta, quote, "has made me personally pledge we are going to get the UFO information out one way or another. Maybe we could have, like, a task force to go to Area 51 in Nevada," close quote. And keeping track of the John Podesta, Hillary, and Bill Clinton interests in UFOs is Grant Cameron from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. He produces and reports the excellent website presidentialufo.com. Grant's books include UFOs, MJ-12 and the Government, UFOs, Area 51, and Government Informants, and most recently his third book is Alien Bedtime Stories, released in February 2015. That has a lot of information about Hillary and Bill Clinton's interest in UFOs and their communications with Lawrence Rockefeller in the early 1990s about declassifying government UFO files for all Americans. I asked Grant why John Podesta, working as a counselor in the Barack Obama White House, would publicly tweet about UFOs on February 13th, 2015, the very day he left the White House to run Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. Here now, from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, is Grant Cameron.
It was the day John Podesta was leaving that he put this out, which could be very embarrassing if you understand, like, this could all sort of backfire. I mean, you could suddenly have reporters wondering what's going on. So this is why these are extremely significant tweets, is that John Podesta is a very powerful guy. People know who he is. And to the last day that you leave the administration to put out a very open challenge on UFOs and that you want UFO disclosure, I think it makes the tweet very, very important. And here it is. This is from February 13th, 2015. Finally, my biggest failure of 2014. Once again, not securing the disclosure of the UFO files. And then he puts the truth is out there, and then he copies New York Times Dowd.
Maureen Dowd.
And it was retweeted 1,221 times.
Can you read what else he has tweeted since the February tweet?
He makes the tweet to Lena Dunham. This is the girl that she does an interview with Hillary on video.
An actress?
Yes, this is September 29th, 2015. He says, great interview, Lena Dunham. But Lena, ask her about the aliens next time. And then he puts the truth is out there. and then he copies Hillary Clinton. So this is significant because you've got to remember that John Podesta is Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, and that political campaigns for president cost $1 billion or more dollars. This is big money. And everything is polled. They don't do anything without making sure that it is polling. People have to remember that in a campaign, you don't really care if you're a Democrat who's voting Democrat, because you're going to get a solid percentage. You're going to vote Democrat every time. You don't really care about the Republicans who are voting all the time. It's the swing voters that you want. And these tweets are very significant, coming from the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton, which means that he has polled the issue and that it's going to get a positive reaction from the swing voters. Everybody's after the swing voters, and you're after the swing states. You don't care about Montana, North Dakota, Texas. These are all states where it's already been decided. So they're in New Hampshire, and one of the reporters in New Hampshire works for the Conway Daily Sun, and Hillary goes for a meeting with the board at the Conway paper, and this reporter had asked her in 2007, when she was campaigning in New Hampshire, about UFOs. And she had said, oh, yeah, she was interested in it. She was pretty open about it. And she actually made the statement in 2007 saying, do you know what UFO is the most requested item at the Clinton Library? That's significant because those were all the FOIAs that I filed. Hillary is aware of what had happened. So this time when she meets with the board of the paper and they're talking about all sorts of different subjects, the interview ends, and then he said it was about 90 seconds he had with her, and she didn't go off the record. He asked her again about UFOs, and it was at that point that Hillary says, oh, yeah, I'm interested in this. John Podesta and I promise that we'll get to the bottom of this, and we may even send a task force to Area 51. Then the most significant thing she says, and this has never been from any politician I've ever heard, she actually says they may have visited already, which is significant because lots of people believe there's life out there. The big question is, can they be here? And she actually makes this statement. So when he gets that, he puts the article out, and he's going to another meeting, and he comes back, and this thing has gone viral around the world, and people are phoning him from all sorts of news agencies and stuff. I've had a number of conversations with him since. He has talked to other reporters, and he said he has complete support from his editorial people, the editor, and people at the paper, and they want more. And he intends, if he can, to talk to all the people that are still campaigning in New Hampshire.
In addition to her saying that she thought that life could already have been on Earth, she said if she were elected, she'd think about putting together a committee to go to Area 51 and investigate.
Yes. I think she's taking some of that from John Podesta. He was the chief of staff for Bill Clinton, and he's, of course, famous for X-Files. And when he was still at the White House, they had written a major article on him about his fascination with the X-Files. And he had stated that he would always go home every time there was a new X-Files. And he famously talked about the fact that he phoned Area 51 when he was at the White House to ask whether they had this alien, what's going on at Area 51. So this is where this Area 51 keeps coming up. And when Bill Clinton goes on the Kimmel show, he also talked about it in 2005 in Hong Kong at an event with a bank there where he was giving a speech. The guy who was organizing it asked Clinton the UFO question, and he talked about it there as well, that he claimed that he had sent people to Area 51 to investigate whether they had this alien and this base underground, because that, of course, was the theme of Independence Day, which ran when Bill Clinton was in office. This whole idea about the president and Area 51. Before, Clinton didn't use the name Area 51 because it was still classified, but now he will actually use the term Area 51. So Hillary's working off that as well. She's talking about the Roswell thing and Area 51 because Bill always talks about it. It seems to be like there's certain things that they can talk about. So when they talk about UFOs, they talk about these two items, Roswell and Area 51.
Now, in 2002, John Podesta was at the National Press Club in Washington on behalf of his group, the Freedom of Information Coalition. He stated publicly, quote, "It is time for the government to declassify records that are more than 25 years old and to provide scientists with data that will assist in determining the real nature of this phenomena," close quote. Why is it that John Podesta has been trying to open up the truth about UFOs, interactions with other intelligences in this universe and this Earth? Why does John Podesta keep making these statements and pushing behind the scenes?
There's two things. Number one, whatever got him into the UFO thing, he's fascinated with X-Files. Even in his office, when he was at the White House, he had all sorts of X-Files paraphernalia in the waiting room going into his office. For whatever reason, he's fascinated with the subject. The other thing that's very important to realize about John Podesta is he's what I call a Madison guy. The Madison Institute is based on open government. And John Podesta, if you read his speeches, if you read some of the material that he put out in the 1990s, you will see that he is adamant. He is a firm believer that a population cannot be governed unless the people have the information. So he's not just doing it like a lot of politicians just because it sounds good. He actually believes this. He believes that the people have to have the information, and he believes this with the UFO thing, that if the people have the information, whatever comes out, they will make the right decision. And so when he makes the statement at the Sci-Fi press conference in 2002, he adds, because it's the law. He believes this. He firmly believes that it is the law that people should have the information and that this should not be withheld. This is illegal. It should be brought out.
Is there anything in your research going back to the early 1990s when Hillary was working behind the scenes so strongly to try to get her husband, Bill Clinton, to open up the UFO field, and she was talking with Lawrence Rockefeller? Is there any understanding that you have about how much Hillary and Bill Clinton do know? How much does John Podesta know? And what is it that keeps them, when they are at the height of power, from being able to leverage open everything?
That's where I sort of differ from, I think, a lot of UFO researchers. Most researchers believe that the president doesn't know what's going on. And a lot of people, when it comes to Clinton, will reference a statement that Bill Clinton made to Sarah McClendon. Sarah McClendon went to the president and said, Mr. President, why don't you do something about what this group is demanding? Why don't you do something about UFOs? Supposedly the president leaned over and said, Sarah, there's a government inside the government and I don't control it. That's where this idea came that Bill Clinton really didn't know what was going on, that the secret government had sidestepped him. I used to believe that, but I no longer believe that. I absolutely believe that the president knows what's going on. So what I say is happening is that this idea that the president doesn't know what's going on is something to create this plausible deniability. So when Bill Clinton talks about it, he always says, well, I couldn't figure out what was going on. If people think the president knows what's going on, then they're going to ask him what's going on, and he doesn't really want to answer the question because there's a lot of it that he really doesn't have the answers to. So I believe the presidents know when you win the presidency, you get what's called the intelligence briefing. It'll happen this November, 2 weeks after the election. Whoever wins the election will be sat down by the CIA director who's in there right now. They sit you down. They don't read you all the secrets, how many governments have been overthrown, how many people got killed, the UFOs, and then get you to sign the secrecy thing. They sit you down and you sign the secrecy oath before the briefing begins. Once the president signs the secrecy oath, the president is sworn to secrecy. So the president has to work backwards, and that's what's happening. That's why Bill Clinton in 1995 signed the executive order to try to force out the UFO documents, and it didn't work. But he did force out. John Podesta helped him to write this executive order. They forced out 800 million pages of classified material. They were hoping the UFO stuff came out, but it didn't come out. Same as John Podesta when he comes out about this tweet about the thing in 2014 I'm most disappointed in was that I didn't get UFO disclosure. It basically says, I talked to Barack Obama about this. We tried to get this, and everybody's hands are still tied. We can't get it out. So he's making it public, because he did say to the Washington Post, the same as Hillary knew that I filed all the FOIAs with the Clinton administration, Podesta knows I'm filing FOIAs on him as well. He told the Washington Post at one time, he said, I've got to make this public because I know people are going to file FOIAs on me. He knows I'm filing FOIAs. All correspondence between Podesta and Bill Clinton, between Barack Obama and Podesta. He knows that in history people are going to record what he did. So that's why he does the tweet. He says, he's just putting it on the record. I tried to get it out again in 2014 when he was at the White House. I couldn't get it out, and he's just putting it on the record.
And, George, all of this makes bringing into clearer focus what happened back in September 14 to 15, 1993, when Dr. John Mack from Harvard, Robert Bigelow, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, Bruce Maccabee, C.B. Scott Jones, we were at the JY Ranch at Jackson Hole with Lawrence and Mary Rockefeller and Bootsy Galbraith. And Mr. Rockefeller had asked this group of us to bring whatever was our latest research. This is 1993, and that's September. And this has to do with Lawrence Rockefeller feeling that he had both a responsibility and I think a right as an American tax-paying citizen to demand of the new Clinton administration that based on the information that he, Lawrence Rockefeller, was gathering from all over the place about UFOs and knowing it was real, knowing ETs are real, that we're not alone in the universe, that administration just had to open it up. As Podesta said, it is illegal to keep this kind of information from the American public. And it is fascinating looking back. I was there. I was with him. We heard his questions. We did not know what was behind the scenes that he was holding as a kind of velvet thread, that he felt that the Clinton administration should open all of this up.
Was talking with Stephen Bassett, and he was so disappointed that Hillary was not asked a question about the UFOs in her recent debate.
I know the reporters, I don't understand this world. It's like
it was right there.
He's throwing glitter in the air and saying, ask her about
Please.
UFOs.
Somebody ask her.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do it.
I'm willing.
You would have done a great job there, Linda.
Yeah, I'm definitely willing.
Well, you think we're ever going to get the bottom line to this?
Well, I think we're getting motion, George, on somebody somehow. Things are beginning to crack open. I think it's almost as if some line has been crossed, that now the inevitable direction is out into the solar system, and that everybody on the planet has to learn something about UFOs, ETs, and that the old notion that we are alone in this universe is preposterous, and our government has known that that was not true since at least the early 1940s, if not before.
And welcome back to Coast to Coast. Linda Moulton Howe back with us. And this week, Linda has some amazing stories. Linda, welcome back. Always good to have you on the show.
Well, thank you, George. And you know, it was 1 year ago on January 29th, 2016, that I reported about a newly discovered ninth planet at the edges of our solar system. I've talked with Michael Brown before. He is a PhD professor of planetary astronomy at Caltech in Pasadena, but this was really something that he was reporting, this huge object that he was estimating was somewhere between 10 to 20 times the mass of Earth and moving in a huge, big, looping orbit far beyond Pluto in a region between what's called the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud. Well, Professor Brown simply called this discovery a year ago Planet 9, and the discovery has been like chasing a ghost. Whatever is out there, its mass is so great that its gravitational field pushes half a dozen other Kuiper Belt objects to cluster together on the opposite side of Planet 9's huge looping orbit. The mystery object does not come anywhere close to our solar system's original Planet 9 that used to be dear old Pluto. before it was reduced to an icy dwarf planet because Pluto is too small to be a real planet. And in fact, it was Mike Brown, professor of planetary astronomy at Caltech,
same guy.
2003. He is the guy who is responsible for Pluto's downfall or recategorization. And 14 years ago, Professor Brown discovered another dwarf planet that he called Eris that is more massive than Pluto. So it was Professor Brown who argued that Pluto should be downgraded from the 9th planet in our solar system to a dwarf planet, and he wrote a book in 2010 about that change called How I Killed Pluto and Why It Had It Coming. Now, in January 2017, we're now a year later, after a year of high hopes that his photography at the Twin Keck and Subaru telescopes in Hawaii would show Planet 9 in a kind of smudge of movement, which is what astronomers look for. The stars should not be moving, but if you have a planet or a comet, they look for smudges in their photographs, and he is still looking, trying to nail down where is this Planet 9 that it is so massive that it has all these consequences on all these other objects in the Kuiper Belt. But to date so far, no moving smudge has been found in the images, and visible light telescopes have not been able to see any reflection from a large body at the edge of the Oort cloud. Now they think this object is 1,000 astronomical units from Earth. And to give you an idea, 1 astronomical unit is the 93 million miles from Earth to the Sun. We're talking about this massive object, 1,000 astronomical units from Earth. Well, Professor Brown, earlier this month, was on 60 Minutes to talk about this research and how he's looking for this hard evidence of Planet 9's massive, what he thinks is probably a planet like Neptune. He said that he hoped that he would have photographic moving smudge evidence by the end of this year now, of 2017. And if that happens, then every large telescope on Earth and in orbit will start staring where the first smudge is found, and they will try to get more detailed photographs of this mysterious, massive object that might even be a captured rogue planet from a completely foreign star system. Here now to give us an update about the massive anomaly between the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud is Caltech Professor of Astronomy Mike Brown.
Professor Brown, why is it so difficult to see even in visible light reflected?
The problem is that it is so far away that even though large, it's amongst the faintest things that we can see with our biggest telescopes. So we have to spend a lot of time on the very small number of really large telescopes to have a hope of seeing it at all.
What is it that you look for?
We take a picture of the sky, and then we come back the next night and we take a picture of the same spot in the sky, and we look for anything that's moving between those two nights. All the stars and all the galaxies are going to be in the same place night after night after night, and anything that's in our solar system will be moving across the sky. And because Planet 9 will be so far away, it'll be the slowest moving object in our solar system. So we'll just barely see it move in those two nights. But as soon as we see it move, we'll know what it is.
And then you would go back out to Hawaii to Subaru Keck and start taking more photographs right at that point where you see what you think might be a moving smudge?
That's exactly right. We would predict where it should be a week later, and then we will look with things like the Keck telescope, but we'll also, at that point, try to get our hands on every other telescope you can imagine. That'll be a perfect thing to look at with the Hubble Space Telescope, with big radio telescopes like in South America. Many, many different telescopes will be able to observe it once we pinpoint where it is.
Okay, and you mean observe in visible light so that we might actually get telescopic photographs of this massive object out between the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud.
Absolutely.
And what do you expect it's going to look like?
It's going to be interesting to see. My first guess is that it'll be kind of like Neptune because it's close in mass to Neptune. And yet, it's so much further out than Neptune, so much colder, that it clearly is going to be different in some ways. And people have tried to predict what it would be like. And I think one of the really interesting things will be to see how well we can even predict these things. I don't know what it's going to look like.
So if it is a planet comparable to Neptune, that would be enough mass to cause the 13 objects to cluster together?
Absolutely.
Okay, now, if it is a gaseous Neptune-type planet, how could it remain gaseous that far away from the sun?
So you might think because it's so far away that all those gases should freeze, but just like the Earth, a planet like that will have a lot of heat coming from its inside. And the bigger the planet is, the more heat it has coming from the inside. Even a planet like Uranus, more heat is coming from the inside on Uranus than is coming in from the sun. So once you get out beyond Uranus's distance, the fact that there's very little sunlight actually doesn't matter very much because you still have all that heat coming from the inside. Now, if you could wait something like 100 billion years, then that planet would freeze into a little ice ball because all of its internal heat would finally go away.
Why would something like Neptune, 10 to 20 times the size of the Earth, be all the way out to the inner Oort cloud from all the rest of the solar system?
That's a really great question, and it's one that our current theories about the existence of Planet 9 don't really say anything about how it got there, but it's one that we can still speculate about. There have been really two main ideas that people have talked about that make sense. One is that it actually could have been captured. It could have been another star was going by. It had a planet, and we stole its planet. So it actually started around a different star, and now it's around ours. I think the more likely scenario is that Planet 9 formed down close to Uranus and Neptune. I think it's not a coincidence that it's about the same mass as Uranus and Neptune. It formed close to them, but if you try to put too many planets together, one of them will get jostled around and eventually get a little bit too close to Jupiter or a little bit too close to Saturn, and they'll get a slingshot outward. And just like we do with all of our spacecraft when we're sending them out past Jupiter, we slingshot them past Jupiter. This would be a planet slingshotting past Jupiter, and then it gets ejected out into the outer part of the solar system where it lurks for the next 4 billion years.
Wow, I see. Our sun has what is called a mysterious 6-degree tilt. And you have done research trying to figure that out, and you now link the 6-degree tilt to the discovery of the mysterious ninth planet?
Yeah, it's quite a remarkable chain of events. All of the 8 planets that we know are all in one disk around the sun. They're tilted with respect to each other by at most about 1 degree. It's really a very flat disk. And the sun itself is tilted compared to that disk by about 6 degrees. 6 degrees is not a huge number, but when everything else is so flat compared to that, it really stands out. And this was first discovered in the mid-1800s, but there hasn't ever really been a very good explanation for why that might be. And while we were working on our ideas about Planet 9, I think we realized that the existence of Planet 9 requires that the sun be tilted. So it's actually not the sun that's tilted, but Planet 9 tilts the planets. If all the planets started out with exactly the same orientation as the sun, over 4 billion years, Planet 9 would slowly tilt those planets in the direction of Planet 9. And we could calculate about how much that would happen, and the answer is about 6 degrees. So we are living on a 6-degree tilted Earth. We look at the sun and say, oh, no, the sun is tilted by 6 degrees. But it's really us that are tilted by 6 degrees.
Isn't that amazing that all of this impact on the solar system and even the sun would be caused by an object out in the Oort cloud that we can't even see?
Yeah, I think it's actually incredible. The trick is that Planet 9 is so far away that it has a huge lever arm. It's not nearly as massive as Jupiter, and yet it can still tilt the orbit of Jupiter because it's so far away that it can pull on that lever so well.
Between where we are right now on Earth and 100,000 astronomical units out to the edge of the Oort cloud, do you think there's any possibility there is a 10th planet?
Absolutely. It's hard to imagine that there's not. It might be one that's just beyond Planet 9. There might be ones that are out lurking in the Oort cloud. I don't know. But now that we understand more about the solar system and how it formed and how things got ejected around, it would surprise me more if there's not one than if there is one.
When is your next trip to the Hawaiian Subaru telescope to take more photos?
We think that Planet 9 is in the part of the sky that's only visible in the fall. So we are spending the spring and the summer analyzing our old data and refining our predictions, and then we'll be starting up again come this next fall.
Why do you think it's only in this one particular area you can see in the fall?
This is what we have done with our computer simulations, is tried to use them to pinpoint where it is, and all of those simulations suggest that that's the location where the forces are coming from.
What if it's not?
If it's not, then we'll have to figure out why we got these calculations wrong, but we will continue looking in the other parts of the sky too. But I don't think it's going to be in the other parts of the sky. I think we're going to find it there in the fall.
But can you photograph other parts of the sky and have other people looking?
Absolutely, and at least a dozen different teams are trying to come up with their own ways of searching too. So there are many people looking in many different and sometimes very clever ways. So I think that we will scour the entire skies until we find this thing.
You will go down in history as the astronomer who knocked Pluto out of being a planet and then discovered the 9th planet out somewhere near the Oort cloud.
I'm actually glad it worked out that way, because if Pluto were still thought to be a planet and then we found this new one, people would really be confused at what it means to be a planet. But now, when we find Planet 9, it is a massive planet in good standing, and I think people now understand that it's a substantial find, not just a tiny little thing. This is 5,000 times more massive than Pluto.
What was your argument for why Pluto had to lose its status as a planet?
If you look at the solar system, it's very clear that the solar system is divided into a small number of truly massive objects, the planets, and then a huge number of tiny objects that are getting tossed around by the planets. They flit in and out of the orbits of the planets. They get ejected by the planets. Pluto is just one of these tiny objects.
That makes all of this even a larger irony. You end up knocking Pluto out, but finding the 9th planet.
Yeah, it is a remarkable chain of events. I definitely agree.
If you can find Planet 9 this year of 2017 and you go into the history books forever, what would be the next most exciting astronomical challenge you would like to take on?
I'm actually very excited about, once we find it, that's only the beginning of the job. And it's actually studying it is what I'm most excited about. There are very few opportunities in history to have suddenly a new planet appear and then get to study it, learn about it, figure out where it came from. We can try to answer all these questions about how it got there, understand what it really looks like, understand what's been happening out there all these years. So I think that understanding more and more about this Planet 9 is going to take many, many years, if not decades.
Do you mean that once you have actually got a visible light photograph and you know exactly where it is, that you can then put that precise data into the computer simulation and you will see sort of past, present, and future truths about its orbit?
It won't be quite as easy as that, but I think that when we see it, we see the orbit. When we see what it's made out of, we see what kind of, if it has moons, if it has rings, all these different things that we can learn about giant planets. I think we'll be able to start putting together stories about where it came from, how it got there, what sort of beast we're really looking at.
I hope they can observe it, Linda.
Oh, I do too. And George, some other scientists have run 156 computer simulations designed to see if the computer shows that this maybe was a large rogue planet that wandered into the edge of the Oort cloud long ago, Was it captured there by the gravity of our sun and planets, or is it possible that this came from a completely foreign system somewhere? And it turns out 60% of the time in the computer simulations, the rogue planet entered our solar system, was able to leave and keep on going. But 40% of the cases where the rogue planet is captured by our sun and solar system, it remained in orbit in our system no matter where it came from. So seeing what this looks like is really going to be fun.
Linda, if they didn't knock out Pluto, would this planet be Planet X?
Well, it's an interesting question. I know we're in the territory of Nibiru and Anunnaki.
It's amazing.
And, yeah, it is. But astronomers will tear their hair out and say, please don't mix it up. But I think we have to consider what the Anunnaki were carving in the cuneiform.
Is this planet 9, that they would love to see, is it on a 3,600-year elliptical orbit?
No, it's, what is it? I think it's
then,
thousands, because it is so far. It's 1,000 astronomical units, and so it is going to take, thousands of years to go around the sun, whereas in the Anunnaki, in the cuneiform, they talked about a 3,600
years
a cycle, but astronomers say they can't find anything that would match it at 3,600. So this is a real ancient and present mystery.
Linda, nothing like looking for extraterrestrial life out there in the universe. It's exciting.
Yes, it is, and there are some astronomers, PhDs for a long time, who take it quite seriously.
They do. Including
the man I have interviewed for tonight on this one. It starts 2 years ago on November 15th, 2015. The American Astronomical Journal, very reputable, published a paper entitled, quote, Searching for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Signals in Astronomical Spectra, Including Existing Data. The writer is Ermanno Bora, Ph.D., Professor of Physics at Laval University in Quebec City, Canada. In his paper, Dr. Bora wrote, quote, Consider an extraterrestrial civilization that is more advanced than ours. Let us assume that they want to signal their existence to other civilizations. This is not an easy task considering how vast the universe is. The best chance of being seen is by being accidentally detected during astronomical observations. And they know this on the basis of their own experience, that a scientifically advanced civilization observes the sky and take spectra of astronomical objects. Consequently, a good way to let others know of their existence is to generate a signal that is so unusual that it can only be artificial. A most unusual signal would be made of a spectral modulation that is so unusual that it warrants more observations, which will then reveal that it is artificial. ETI could signal its existence to others by sending light pulses with time separations of the order of 1 billion pulses a second that could be detected in spectra, close quote. Now it's 2 years later after that paper's proposal that astronomers do sky searches for unusual spectral modulation. And Dr. Bora had his graduate student, Eric Trottier, analyze 2.5 million spectra in the Sloan Digital Sky Survey using Fourier transform analysis. Out of 2.5 million stars, only 234 were unusual in the same way. 1 billion color modulated pulses per second, as Dr. Bora had suggested in his 2012 paper. Also strange is that all 234 stars are yellow suns like our solar system sun. Dr. Bora hypothesizes that the unusual rapid and color-modulated pulses could be intelligent signaling from ETI, extraterrestrial intelligence, letting the universe know they are there and advanced enough to produce such signaling technology. Dr. Bora and Eric Trottier then reported their investigation in the publications of the Astronomical Society of the Pacific 3 months ago, on October 14, 2016, under the title Discovery of Peculiar Periodic Spectral Modulations in a Small Fraction of Solar-Type Stars. The SETI Research Center at the University of California, Berkeley, said about this new paper, quote, "The 1 in 10,000 objects with unusual spectra seen by Bora and Trottier are certainly worthy of additional study," close quote. So here now from Laval University in Quebec City, Canada, is Professor Hermano Bora.
Scientific research for extraterrestrial intelligence is a very valid scientific research. Lots of papers have been written on that, but intelligent life, none has been found. I wrote a paper, 2012, where I predicted if aliens want to let us know that they exist, they can let us know that they are there by sending pulses of light. So it's like flashlight, turn on and off. But these are extremely rapid pulses. We're talking 1/1000th of a second. So very, very fast pulses of light.
If I understand correctly, in approximately the year 2012, you predicted that one of the signals in the cosmos that we might look for would be, quote, a peculiar periodic spectral modulation in a small fraction of solar-type stars, and that these modulations could originate from extremely powerful lasers or even from the manipulation of the star's light output by a sufficiently advanced extraterrestrial intelligence. So this is what you mean, that a flash of billionths of a second, billions of these flashes in a second, is what you and your colleague have been looking for.
Yeah, I predicted them in the theoretical paper. As I said, with a powerful laser, intelligent life creates these flashes of light, and that creates a color modulation, okay? With the most powerful lasers that we have on Earth right now, we could create such signals. So imagine what a civilization which is thousands of years more advanced than us can do. Mm-hmm. And what happens is these flashes of light, they create what's known as a spectral modulation, which is a color that varies, very tight light spacings.
Did you say that it produces a special color in the pulses?
Yeah, the color pulses, so it's like turning a flashlight on and off, billionths of a second. It creates colors that change. You find colors that increase in intensity, like blue is very intense, yellow is very weak, red is very strong, except that the colors are very close together. Imagine the blue is very bright, the yellow is fainter, and then the red is bright again. I had a graduate student, Eric Trottier, who did his master thesis with me, and one of the subjects of his thesis was to look for the kind of signal which I had predicted. And what we did to discover this kind of signals, we went through an astronomical database which consists of spectra of astronomical objects. The Sloan Digital Sky Survey, my student analyzed 2.5 million spectra. I repeat, 2.5 million spectra of objects in the sky. And after analyzing the spectra to look for the kind of signal which I had predicted, it found exactly the signal which I had predicted in only 234 stars. And the strange thing is that the majority of the stars have a spectral type, which is a color, which is similar to the color of the sun.
All 234 of the stars that came up in your research are in the same type, yellow sun, like a G-star sun. Those are what you ended up with as filtering out of your research, looking for the billion flashes a second.
Exactly. The majority of the 234 stars look like the sun, very close to the sun. And even the other ones, they are not that much warmer or that much colder. It's a very small fractions of the stars that look like the sun that have this. It's not that all of the stars that look like the sun have the signal. We did a scientific study of this, to make sure that it could not be caused by statistical fluctuations. And the answer was no, okay? The very, very brightest of all the stars that look like the sun have the signal. Well, it's very obvious why we detected such a small number. Is because, the signal was too weak, that only the brightest ones had the signal. But it was not the case. It was not just the brightest ones. The distribution of the apparent light, the light that we see from the stars, varied among the stars. It was not just the brightest one that had it. And we did a very thorough scientific statistical analysis, and it shows that it was not due to statistical fluctuations.
Professor, if I understand correctly, you originally presented and published your hypothesis in 2012 because you were thinking of the Type 2 Kardashev scale to look for extraterrestrial intelligence in the universe. And at the Type 2, the category would be intelligence capable of either producing a technology that could pulse 1 billion times a second of light or could manipulate their local sun to somehow flash at 1 billion times a second, and that this would separate out these signals from everything natural?
Exactly. In the paper, suggested that lasers would do that. So it's pretty well what you just said. So what happens is that by sending this strange signal, they let us know, hey, we are here.
Is it true that the signals that you have been studying are so much alike?
Yes, exactly. They are so much alike, yes. And the hypothesis I make is that the reason why this intelligent life sends us the same signal is because these intelligent life have already communicated with each other, a long time back, because, they may be thousands and thousands of years more advanced than we are. So because they already have communicated with each other, hey, let's send exactly the same messages, the same pulses, so that some other civilization sees that and find these strange signals. And why are so much alike? That's strange. So they begin investigating that. They find out that it is ETI. It's a hypothesis that I made. Let's make it clear. I'm not certain 100% is that. Again, I am a scientist.
Can you explain for a general audience what is it about the signals that are so much alike?
It's that the light pulses, they send pairs of pulses which are separated by exactly the same time. It's like turning a flashlight on and off, and all of these on-off, the separation between the on-off and on-off, the time separation is exactly the same, fraction of billionth of a second.
What would be your proposal for further study on these billion-a-second light-flashing suns?
Well, one would have to use a large telescope and then use specialized instrumentation which look for light pulses, because the signal that we found is not light pulses, it's the modulation in the color. But it's such a strange color modulation that I do not see what physical cause could cause that modulation. It's not a natural modulation.
And what will be the next step that you do to try to study this modulation in color that is so unusual?
Well, I would not be able to do it myself. I wait for somebody else to do it because you need the specialized instrumentation, which I do not have.
What do you say to scientists who might be critical of the hypothesis that these 234 sources in which there is unusual modulation of color, they might argue that that doesn't mean they are intelligences in the type 2 on the Kardashev scale?
And it is very, very strange that only 234 objects out of so many have the signal.
If you are correct, Professor, then you would be the first discoverer of other intelligence in the universe?
Yes.
Why do you think that another intelligence, perhaps a type 2 on the Kardashev scale, why would they be signaling for other attention?
Well, it's hard to tell why, but my guess is that what they do, they would want to communicate with us.
Last year in 2016, astrophysicist Stephen Hawking warned that Earth should not be sending out search for extraterrestrial intelligence signals, SETI, because there could be danger on the other end of signals from Earth when we do not know the intent of other intelligence in this universe. Some could be quite hostile, while some are friendly.
They may be 10,000 or even 100,000 years more advanced than we are. Can you imagine what kind of technology they have? We cannot imagine it at all. We do not have the slightest idea of what technology they have. And it's possible that they can communicate faster than light. We simply don't know it.
But you personally are convinced that in this 13.8 to 9 billion light-year universe, that it is likely that there is other intelligence than not.
Being an astronomer, I would think that it is almost certain that life exists somewhere else. The numbers of stars in our galaxy is so huge. We're talking about billions of stars, that intelligent life exists.
I like that, Professor.
Oh, I do too, and I certainly agree with his last statement. It is like it's unreasonable to look at photographs of millions and millions of galaxies, each having millions and millions of stars, and think that this planet in this arm of the Milky Way galaxy would be the only planet in this entire universe that had life. It makes no sense. That is a weird hypothesis. And a decade ago, in February of 2008, NASA pointed its Deep Space Network telescopes toward the North Star, Polaris. It's 430 light years from Earth. And they sent toward it a Beatles song called Across the Universe. And their goal was to wonder if intelligent aliens that might be somewhere around Polaris in 430 years might get this Beatles song from Earth. And that fits into an interview that I did last year with Lynn Buchanan, who worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency Stargate program as a controlled remote viewer. And that was in the late 1980s, and he told me that one of his remote viewing assignments showed him that the, quote, universe is teeming with life. Some of it is friendly and some is very unfriendly, close quote. Either way, Lynn Buchanan knows that humans are not alone in this universe, as his perspective as a remote viewer, and that we never have been alone. And he thinks, like I do and so many other people now, we all deserve to know the truth that our governments hide.
Will we ever get the truth, though, Linda? Will they ever tell us?
Well, I think I'm reporting the truth all the time at earthfiles.com and all the media work, and I'm getting truths from whistleblowers, from people in the abduction syndrome.
You're the farthest from fake news they can get.
That's right. And what is refreshing is that ranchers who have been dealing with animal mutilations for decades and know that they've seen the beams of light coming from round things in the sky, and that they look at the bloodless, trackless nature of the animals, and they know that what I've reported, that this is, and law enforcement has said these are creatures from outer space, is true. But does it mean that they are necessarily hostile to humans? There's no evidence yet. And that we might be dealing with survival problems on the part of other intelligences that use Earth sort of like a supermarket and a laboratory. And this is what I so much would like to understand and be able to report.